Alright, really what I'm going to take you through is, first of all, just an overview of the Student Sponsorship Program. That's the full name of SSP. Just really looking at our model, the program itself, how we think we contribute to making South Africa a better place. Secondly, I would like to look at our scholar recruitment process, how it used to run, and also review what are some of the changes that have taken place with the process of old, and just what we have instituted and what does the new process look like. I would also like to look at some trends and where it looks like we're finding most of the scholars for our scholarships. Okay, so let's get started. Alright, SSP basically recruits what we think are high potential learners out of primary schools, and we really identify them for our scholarships in high school. We fund 5 years of high school, but we particularly fund students to go to specific schools. Okay, I will show you a list of the schools at a later stage, but those are mostly private schools, but some public schools as well. So if I could make examples, you have GP girls, Pretoria girls and boys, but we also have on the program schools like St. Mary's, St. John's, St. Albans and Pretoria. We recruit learners in their grade 6 year. So any learner who was in grade 6 this year would have applied to the program starting in June, and we are busy now with our recruitment and selection process. Okay, so they have to be in their grade 6 year because while they're in grade 7, we try to prepare them for high school. This is only something that began in 2008. We've been in existence since 2000. So the program was founded in 1999, and we placed 25 scholars in 4 different schools in Johannesburg alone in 2000, and our first class of graduates was in 2004. Okay, and with experience over the years, we saw that our learners are at a disadvantage both academically and socially. Academically because when you don't have the right foundation from primary school, then really what the teachers are doing in grade 8 and 9 is remediating. Socially because they're entering alien environments. The schools that I've mentioned are big, they're environments that they've never been in, and they're environments of opulence. There are many kids in the schools that have much more than they do. So those are some of the struggles that we deal with. Okay. We are donor funded, both by high net worth individuals and big corporates. Through this funding, we then award students that perform really well in that Scholars Development Program of grade 7 to then go on into our high school scholarship program, and they would be placed at one of our 25 schools. As I mentioned, we started with 4 schools only in Johannesburg. We've now expanded, and we have a presence in Pretoria, East London and in Grahamstown as well. So we're really present in only 2 provinces. We've changed our organizational structure of late, and we have a person focusing, and Lawrence I know has been to this meeting before, Lawrence Corner, and his focus within the organization is national expansion and building strategic relationships around having us have a national footprint. Okay. Another thing that we do is we match each scholar on the program with a mentor, and this would typically be a professional, very often from our sponsors, from the big corporates, but generally somebody who can offer support, and that's broad in terms of support. So socially, they don't necessarily act as a second parent or third parent, but it's just that extra support. But our biggest focus is on career planning with our mentorship program. Okay. Okay, so this is really just a summary of what I've spoken about, the three big programs that we have at SSP. The Scholars Development Program is what we call it. We used to name it the Bridging Program, but bridging was clearly not a good word at the time, and so we changed it to Scholars Development Program, and this is our grade 7 program. We've made significant changes to it over time. At first, how it ran is we had Saturday classes that took place at Sekolo sa Borokgo. We had a partnership with SSB in Randburg. So Saturday classes in maths, science, computer literacy and in English during the grade 7 year. We'd also have throughout the year workshops, 4 workshops in diversity and study skills, personal development and leadership. And we also hold 2 camps in the year. So really that was the model of the SDP before we started instituting some changes. Our high school program is as the main program really. It's just our 5-year high school students in the different partner schools. Scholars have to achieve specific marks while they're in the high school program. We've had many people arguing with what that mark is, and over the years it's always been 65% and above in maths, science and English in particular, and also as an average. And I think from the beginning that was thumb-sucked, so there wasn't really anything informing what is good performance at high school level. But to some degree it was also about, even though you get a child performing at 70%, 80% level in grade 6, grade 7, they won't necessarily be performing at that level in grade 11, grade 12. So it was sort of an average of what do we think our kids can achieve. But that has risen to 70% this year. We've had many of our sponsors saying this is, 65 isn't high enough an expectation of our scholars. And we've had to review that number. During the high school program as well, we've got some support programs, but also workshops that develop leadership, study skills, and personal branding, so building on what happened in the Scholars Development Program. And as I said, each scholar, this is another mentor, each scholar is matched with a sponsor who commits to funding the 5 years of high school. In some cases, we don't find sponsors that can commit to 5 years. Some people say we can't project all that long in advance, so we can fund year on year. So it's been difficult sometimes to find sponsors. I was saying to Carlina this morning, we were presenting to Transnet Rail Engineering. The biggest number that we've had any one sponsor, so any one company or individual, has been 10. So over the years, that's been the biggest number that's been funded by one person or one company. But when we presented this to Transnet yesterday, they said we could even sponsor 100. So we were just thinking, Transnet, where have you been? Okay, so we're looking at welcoming a new sponsor onto the program. And as I mentioned, we matched each of our scholars with a mentor. It used to be at grade 8 level. There have been many changes at SSP. We then decided to only match scholars with a mentor at grade 9 level. We give them a chance to sort of settle into their school, really find their feet. And at grade 9 level is a good time because that's when they start finding themselves in terms of career choices, choosing those subjects at the end of grade 9 in preparation for grade 10, and this is why we match them with a mentor then. Okay, very often people come onto the program as mentors and they're thrown into the deep end because they have a desire to be a mentor and make a difference in a child's life, but they don't know what being a mentor is about. So we have training and assistance for our mentors. Every year we hold about 2 workshops in mentorship, just really helping equip our mentors in doing their jobs. Okay, and this is really just a roundup of where we are right now. We've just offered 33 scholarships for starting in 2013. 6 scholars in the Eastern Cape, and 27 of them are here in Johannesburg and Pretoria, so that brings to 633 the number of scholarships that we've offered since 2000. We have a 100% matric pass rate. This is a number taken from those students that enter grade 12. and then leave grade 12, because some of the students we've lost maybe about not 0.6%, really just under 1% attrition rate. So some scholars we do lose over time. We've had 450 learners in our Scholars Development Program. That's the Saturday classes and workshops and camps that I spoke about in the 7th grade. And of all those that graduate from high school, 91% of them about enter tertiary level. You might wonder what happens to the other 9%, but this is a number based on how many enter it immediately in the next year. So some, as you know, would take a gap year, would go and volunteer or go overseas for programs and that kind of thing. And we've had students, I know one for instance who became a soccer star. We've had one also that after matric recorded a music album. Okay, and as I promised, this is just a list of some of our partners, or all of our partner schools actually. We select our partner schools based first of all on the fact that they have great facilities, they have a lot to offer our scholars over and above academics, and they can get involved in extracurricular activities in the school. It's dependent on their fees, and not that the fees need to be low, but we've got a range of partner schools from, public and private, and a school like Selborne College, for instance, in the Eastern Cape, the fees are about 25,000, but a school like St. Albans in Pretoria, the fees are 140,000. So on average, what we do say it takes to fund each scholar every year is 55,000 now. Okay, and that's on average. And obviously it also depends on their academic record. So schools that are achieving really great marks academically every year, 100% pass rate, a certain number of distinctions in that, and the ability to support more than one scholar that we would place at a school. And obviously also their leadership development programs and any other cultural, social, sports involvement that they can offer our students. Alright, I just want to move on after that overview to our recruitment process, and this is really what we used to do in recruitment, and then we'll later on discuss what are some of the changes that have happened and why. Okay, so this is a summary of our scholar recruitment process of old. The first thing that we would do is extensive outreach. So we would go, or we used to go out to schools. We would visit a selected number of primary schools in our areas. We would also advertise in community newspapers, other mainstream newspapers, announcing on radio stations and having interviews. We would also distribute applications via primary schools, district offices. We present at principal meetings at different districts, and also via libraries as well. Secondly, we would then open recruitment for at least 2 months. We have a strict application criteria, so the students have to be in grade 6, they have to be 12 years or younger, but again they have to be achieving certain marks, and before this year that used to be 65% and above in maths, English and science. Okay. There used to be, a tedious registration process, so we would receive up to 3,000 applications every year. We have to sort through those applications and determine who actually qualifies based on those criteria. So even though you put out the criteria, people don't always, stick to it. So we have to determine who actually is or meets the requirements and can be tested. So we would hold a registration day, and this would happen in 2 different townships and in our offices in Braamfontein as well. People could bring their application forms at that registration day, and we would tell them right there and then whether they qualify or not, and they would go home with an exam ticket. But as you can imagine, because we place boxes in libraries and people can submit through their primary schools or even throughout the 2 months that they are applying, it means that we receive application forms before the registration day. So there used to be a lot of calling of the parents to come back to pick up exam tickets, which was very tedious. The next thing that we would do is then the assessments. We would then hold a big exam for those that qualify, so that could be anything from 1,000 to 1,500 students, and we would hold this exam at a big venue like a hall at Wits University. We had our partner schools setting exams. For a long time it was somebody at St. Mary's who used to set our maths and English exams. And these were purely based on learned knowledge. So any child coming from a disadvantaged primary school in a township may have been at a further disadvantage because they don't have that learned knowledge. And then we would do interviews on only those learners that would have gotten a certain mark on their assessments. And this wasn't a specific grade. And I say here, qualifying criteria were dependent on average performance, but generally above 60%. So it was really largely dependent on, the average performance in that class of learners that wrote the exams. Okay. We would have both social and financial interviews. So in our social interviews, we would interview the child on their own and then the parents on their own. And the scholars were rated on 5 competencies, including motivation and initiative, leadership potential, their rapport, relationship building, and any knowledge of the student program, student sponsorship program, and why they wanted to be on the program. Okay. And then we would go on to a financial interview, and I say here that that was to determine need and affordability. Need, we have set the need at any family who do not make a combined family income of above 200,000. So it had to be anybody that makes below 200,000 a year. And I say affordability because SSP subscribes to the idea that any parent needs to be directly involved in their child's education, and so we determine what can you afford to pay towards your child's education even though they are on a scholarship. Okay? And then from those interviews, then we would select students that would go into our Scholars Development Program, the grade 7 program, and it used to be a program run for 100 kids every year. Okay? And final selection for the scholarship was based on performance in that program. So if it were 80 students that were doing really well and deserved a scholarship, we would offer the 80 scholarships. Okay. There are some key issues with this process. First of all, there was an intense and expensive outreach program with very little return. So we would visit schools, and I remember being in the Eastern Cape, and I would visit schools in Danzani. I would select about 10 schools to visit, and in the end, when you look at who comes through at the end, none of them came from those schools I visited. Okay? The testing of maths and English was purely on the basis of learned knowledge. No skill, no aptitude, no potential in maths and English. And there were no written SSP ideal candidate profile. So we all knew what we were looking for in our minds, and especially the staff of SSP, and especially when we go through interviews, but it wasn't written and it wasn't something that we drove. Okay? And also, as I mentioned, there was no clear performance cutoff, so it depended on the average performance of all of those students taking the maths and English tests. And there were just too many scholars in the Scholars Development Program, and very often we couldn't fund all of them. Okay, so I remember our biggest class, and they're in grade 11 this year, there's 87 of them. I think in that year we took on 93, we've lost some. 87 of them out of the 100 that entered that program. But last year, for instance, we offered only 33 scholarships out of the 100 that were in the program. So there were many scholars who didn't end up with a scholarship after the SDP. Okay, I would just now like to move on to what are some of the changes, or rather what are some of the loopholes that we've identified and how we've made the changes. Okay. We have a partnership with a program called Mzingo, and every year they send fellows to do a fellowship with us for about 6 weeks that come from an MBA program in a Spanish business school. Okay, so we had 2 Mzingo fellows helping us in January, February. One of them focused on overhauling our recruitment process. Okay. So the first thing that Jen did when she came into SSP is she did a survey and interviewed key stakeholders in the program just to determine what are some of the things that we could do better. She interviewed scholars, school principals of our partner schools, and some sponsors as well, just to determine what is it that SSP has been doing and can do better. Okay? And so we were trying to determine which assessment tool or an aptitude test over and above the learned knowledge test that we do can assess learning potential. What makes SSP scholars successful, and that was from a school coordinator, principal, and scholar perspective. How can SSP better prepare our scholars, and this is really just the school's perspective on that. What kind of scholars SSP should be looking for. What is SSP's value add according to our scholars? So we interviewed some of our top learners at these schools and said, what is it do you value about the program? And what is the impact of long commute to school? I've got on the right hand side some key takeaways from this program, and also just some ticks on all of those things that we think we now have right. And you will see that the bottom one, we haven't yet really come up with a way to resolve these issues. Some of those takeaways, just in terms of the assessment tool or aptitude test, we've now adopted an aptitude test which is called the differential aptitude test, the DAT. It's administered by an organization called Mind Music in Pretoria. And this really helps us measure academic potential or aptitude in maths and English. It tests 5 competencies, including computations, which is really maths, memory, reading, non-verbal reasoning, and verbal reasoning as well. And another thing that we've also decided to do is an in-camp selection stage where we actually monitor students in a controlled environment and try to pick up on who are the leaders and their behavior around other kids. The second thing, what makes an SSP scholar successful, we know now that some of our successful learners have been hardworking. They've been very mature in entering these environments. They've been responsible for their own learning, and they've been perseverant. With all of the hardships I mentioned earlier in the schools. And we also know that what makes SSP scholars successful is a nurturing school environment and an inclusive culture. That is very important. So the school welcoming this child and saying, you can be part of the school culture. In terms of how SSP can better prepare our scholars, we know now that schools want scholars that are invested in the school community and know about the school culture. So we were very concerned about, do students know about SSP, about our program, and do they buy into it? And not so very concerned about, do they buy into that school that we're going to take them into? Our learners don't select their own schools, so we would basically say, well, you live in the East Rand, then we will place you at Sahiti School, okay? And not taking into consideration, is this the right fit for the student in terms of environment? Okay, and what kind of scholar SSP should be looking for? We've heard that, SSP should be looking for commitment to learning, so those scholars that will have little distraction even at grade 11 and 12, and innate intelligence and drive and motivation, and also a willingness to get involved in the school culture and in activities at the school. And financial need, as I said, any family that makes under 200,000 income per annum. What is SSP's value add according to our scholars? Our scholars have found that the mentorship program, when they are matched with mentors, works for them. And also the caring support from our staff. We have student program officers within the office that engage with our scholars every now and then at the different schools. And they found that, the more adults care for them and support for them, the better they perform at school. And as I said, this is not as a replacement for the parent, but really just added support for a scholar in terms of having a mentor and that staff member. What is the impact of long commute to school? This is where we're struggling because, as you know, and I said, St. Albans, for instance, school fees are so high that when it includes boarding, it's skyrocketing. The distance between home and school has an impact on the scholars in how they integrate into the school culture and that kind of thing. And this is something that we still need to resolve in terms of, do we buy into boarding and can we afford it? Okay. Right, and I spoke about an ideal candidate profile, and this is what we determined we are looking for. We are looking for a history of academic success, and now what we're doing when our scholars apply, they don't only submit their grade 6 reports, but we're also looking for academic records of grade 4 and grade 5. Okay? The ability to restate what has been learnt in those English and maths exams that we hold, and a high score in the aptitude test. Mind Music does a really good report for us. Every time they test a scholar, a week later they will give us a report saying these are the scholars that are recommended for the scholarship, those that are recommended with caution, so maybe they've achieved below average in any one of the 5 competencies, and also those that are definitely not recommended for the scholarship. That's a report that they give us. Okay, we're also looking for a healthy relationship between the parents and the scholar, and a strong support system at home, and that we try to determine through the social interview that we have with the parents and child. A strong work ethic and a high level of motivation, and an interest in school activities. We're looking for balanced scholars who would take on both cultural sports activities and also do well academically. And we're looking for potential to be a servant leader. Our scholars need to recognize that they were selected out of a lot of kids in their community, and that they need to go back into those communities and serve them. Okay. You will remember that I had a red circle around our recruitment process of old. I'm just highlighting those 3 phases that we used to have before: the application, assessment, and interview phases. The 2 other phases, the outreach and the scholars development program, haven't changed. Okay? So what we've done here is we've expanded the recruitment process a bit more. The first thing that we would do is obviously accept those application forms still. But we're working closely with libraries, and we've just also entered into a partnership with Shell, who then place our application forms and receiving boxes at a number of their service stations so that we're reaching more people. Okay. The assessment phase, instead of just testing purely learned knowledge, we also have included an element of skill in the maths exam especially. Okay, and an average result of above 70% secures the next stage, which is the interview phase. Okay. The candidates are now required, they're not only going to be interviewed, but they're required to select an item that they are most proud of, that they can bring to an interview and present to us on. It was very interesting, actually. We did this 3 weeks ago, and one of the kids brought their little brother to present on. Some of them brought trophies or whatever. So we require each candidate to present on an item that they're most proud of. And this is to assess perseverance, commitment, and of course independence. Okay. The second round of the interview is the scholar and the parents together. So if you remember what I said, we used to have the scholar and then the parent interview, but now we have them together just so that we can assess the interaction between the 2. And then we have still our financial interview to check their finances and their need and affordability. The next stage is that differential aptitude test, and candidates are assessed in those 5 competencies that are named there, and at that stage the students also bring back with them a teacher reference form that we would have given to them blank at the interview phase, and also an extracurricular activities list. So this is what I'm involved in at school, and this is who can vouch for me. So we need a teacher signature on each of those forms, and just a teacher reference form, and this should come from a maths or English teacher. Okay. The next stage is a selection camp phase. We are now at the DAT stage. As I mentioned, these changes have only been instituted at the beginning of this year, so we are still to see how the selection camp runs, but the plan is to invite our scholars that pass the DAT to a 2-day selection camp. This, as I said, is in a controlled environment, and it's to assess behavior and how they interact with their peers and also their leadership potential amongst the group. And results in each of these four phases actually weighted for a final ranking. So you will see that I've got a percentage at the end of those 4 stages. The last stage is a scholar buy-in phase. So having taken from the comment from our schools that they want kids to buy into the school culture and ethos, selected scholars from that camp will be briefed on SSP but also on their future schools. So this is what you can expect from your school. Many of our schools, and especially private schools, will go on to further test the scholars and also interview them. Public schools are not allowed to do that, to test the scholars, so they will probably have a one-on-one interview with the scholars. So it's really about preparing those kids for this is what the partner school will be looking for from you.